General meeting at 7:01 p.m. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The purpose of this meeting is to present the annual report for the 2021-22 year to the community and to allow electors to ask questions and raise motions about local matters. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to welcome all members of the public, councillors, staff who have taken the time to attend tonight's meeting. Firstly, I'll outline the procedures for tonight. First, we will consider the annual report for the 2021-22 financial year. The annual report provides key insights into the City of Bayswater's projects, achievements and financial situation for that period of time. I will be asking for an elector to move and an elector to second the receipt of the annual report, and will then ask all those in favour to raise their hands. Following that, I will ask anyone who is not in favour of the motion to raise their hands. Following consideration of the annual report, we will move on to general business. At the start of general business, electors will be offered the opportunity to ask questions and will be permitted to ask up to 3 questions at one time. We will endeavour to answer questions at this evening's meeting. However, questions that require a detailed response will be taken on notice and responses provided in the minutes of this meeting. If you have more than 3 questions, you will be given another opportunity after others have asked their questions to ask further questions. I hope that makes sense. Motions must be moved and seconded before any discussion is to occur. The mover and seconder and any other elector will be permitted to speak for up to 3 minutes on the motion. The mover of the motion will then have a right of reply for up to 3 minutes. Each elector present is entitled to 1 vote, but does not have to vote. When calling for votes on a motion, I will first ask in favour of the motion to raise their hands, and then ask for those against the motion to raise their hands. I will then declare whether the motion has been carried or lost. Each motion will be conducted by a simple majority, and voting is conducted, so no vote will be secret. Please keep your comments respectful to councillors, staff, and other members of the public here tonight. So we'll now move on to consideration of the annual report. The 2021 annual report and financial statements include the independent auditor's report. These were adopted by council at its meeting held on the 23rd of May 2023. Could I please call for an elector to move to receive the annual report? Moved by Georgina. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Harvey. I'll now put this to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to general business. Electors, you now have the opportunity to ask 3 questions. When you come forward, please approach the lectern at the front and speak into the microphone and state your name and suburb of residence before you proceed to ask your question. First, I'll call upon those who have registered to ask questions, and the first person is Robert Farina.
My name is Robert Farina. I live in Morley. The question needs to ask if we can utilise better resources to rangers to clean up rubbish in front of verges and, illegal dumping in front of verges. Utilising better, utilising ranger services more effectively.
Yeah, I'll just see if they've got the wording of your motion so
Yep.
that the members in the gallery can see the actual wording, and then we'll see if there's a seconder. So, oh, sorry, this is a question. So the question, we'll just get the question up. Yep. Oh, so Mr. Farina, have you provided us the wording of your question? Okay. All right, so I'll go to the director to respond. Acting director.
There's the potential for the city to have a look at that further. We currently have resources allocated to litter control within the city. So our Parks and Gardens staff do go out and undertake cleanups within areas. Currently, rangers will have a look at the enforcement side of dumped rubbish rather than the actual cleanup side.
Thank you. So the next person is Rachel Roberts.
So mine are motions for adoption rather than questions. That's, yeah.
Oh, right now we've got questions.
Oh, okay, that's
So
what
you don't have a
No,
question? Okay, thanks. So the next person is Branko Radanovic. Do you have a question?
Branko Radanovic, Bayswater. I have one question. What is the purpose of underground power in residential streets?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the director to respond.
In terms of underground power in residential streets, the main purpose of putting power underground is to remove the overhead lines and provide a more reliable source of electricity to those properties. It also has other benefits in terms of basically removing those overhead assets and allowing street trees to grow. It also improves the lighting in the area as well, because it allows us to put the light poles where they should be rather than dictated by where the distribution network is. And yeah, and basically, yeah, it just provides a better aesthetic in those areas.
Thank you. A win-win. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person, Georgina Kerr.
Thank you. My name's Georgina Kerr from Bedford. My question is, the City of Subiaco has recently committed to returning to bulk verge collection from Verge Valley, and Stirling is considering it, at least in some areas. Can the city monitor these changes and consider reintroducing bulk verge collections?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the director to respond.
The city currently uses Cleanaway to supply bulk bins to residences. Basically, residents can ring up and ask for a bin, and it can be delivered and picked up. This has been in process for a while now, and we have a contract in place to provide that service. But what we can do is actually look at what the other councils are doing. We always want to know how it's working elsewhere, and we can always review our service that we provide based on the experiences of other councils.
Thank you. Greg Smith, if you could come forward.
Can the city provide accurate data regarding canopy percentages for the city as a whole and for the suburbs that constitute the city?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the director to respond.
The city currently has LiDAR information in terms of how much canopy coverage we have across the city. That can be broken down into suburbs. That data is getting a bit older now. It was done a couple of years ago, but we have got a new LiDAR survey planned for early next financial year.
Could that information be put into the percentage information be put into something like your Bayswater Beat newsletter that we get every so often?
Once we have that information available, we can.
Okay, my next question. How much money has been allocated in the current budget for property council funding sponsorship?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the CEO to respond.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm not aware that we've got any specific property council funding sponsorship, but what we do is we have money associated with economic development forums, and I know we've got one coming up in August in relation to that as well, but I'm not sure that we've got it specifically for property council, but I will take that on notice just to confirm for you, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question is, has council allocated any money in the current budget for dendrophobe alleviation?
Thanks for your question. I'll go to, we'll take that on notice.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll just go through, do you have a question? Wendy Garstone.
Thank you. In early 2022, the city updated the tree policy to allow residents to prune the street tree adjacent to their properties. The guide to how to do this, I believe, is fairly reasonable, however, open to abuse if someone decides to prune to their own personal expectations or standards. I'm aware of one example in Francis Street, Bayswater, where the tree growth and form of a street tree has been damaged due to over pruning by a property owner. So my question is, can the city please provide comment on how the pruning aspect of the tree policy has and may in the future impact the overall tree canopy percentage of the city?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the director to respond.
In terms of tree pruning by residents, the example on Francis Street, that's one we'll look into. We're not aware of that particular case. In terms of other situations, I'm not aware of other ones where people have abused that policy. But if residents are willing to tell us where they are, we'll investigate those. So in terms of providing comment in terms of the future impact, obviously those trees that are damaged or found to be damaged, it's not good and we need to do work to improve those. But overall tree canopy, in terms of how much damage is done to that, is probably hard to tell without understanding what the extent of the damage is.
Is it something that you could refer to your staff who are on the street to see if there's some sort of feedback from officers who might see examples themselves? Is it possible to check with your staff?
Officers, we have staff that drive around, obviously, because they do the work out there, so they're aware of anything that changes out there, but they don't see everything that happens out there, so that's why we also rely on some residents notifying us if they see something that's occurred.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else who hasn't registered like to ask a question? Please come forward.
Harvey Tonkin in Miranda. My question relates to, I think it's Snap, Send, Solve. It's an app. A few years back, with a previous CEO, I asked what sort of facilities were available, and I was advised that there was an app which I've used recently. I've noticed that City of Bayswater isn't a paying member. In other words, they don't, because there's different responses. I can take a photo, it'll go to the City of Bayswater, and that's it. I then need the City of Bayswater to respond back to me. My problem arises in the fact that I reported broken glass at a playground. No, it's solved. It's okay. You don't have to write it down. I reported broken glass at a playground, and I've had a problem recently, so I wasn't able to go and check. But my wife indicated a couple of days later it had been rectified. But it was about 5 days later I received a response from the staff member advising that we notified the staff in the particular department. My query is 5 days, if it took that long, 5 days is too long, right? If I'm going to use an app, like I can phone up Monday morning, 9 o'clock, and I'll speak to the staff member, and hopefully if someone's free, they'll go and fix it that day. If I'm going to use an app for convenience, then is the City of Bayswater looking at accessing this app so that the feedback can come back to me promptly? In other words, I assume, I don't know how exactly it works, but I've assumed that the onus is then on the council to advise the people with the app that we've done the job, and then I get a response back. Because when I take the photo, it takes the GPS coordinates, I put a description in, has my name, telephone number. So I'm asking, has the City of Bayswater considered that?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the CEO to respond.
Through the chair, happy to look into that. We are always looking at ways to improve that customer interface, and obviously the use of technology should improve that. But we'll look into it to make sure that that process can be speeded up and more timely for customers and that. So we'll certainly look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to ask a question? Mr. Smith? You can come forward and ask it. Is that the one on the screen now? Okay.
Apparently with the new upgrade at the train station, instead of having flooding in the subway, pipes are directing the flooding, directing that flood water into Halliday Park, and there's going to be a couple of sumps there. So I want to know, has the city assessed the impact of this water upon the water table of Halliday Park and nearby Rose Avenue residents following the use of Halliday Park as an overflow drainage reserve from the train station upgrade?
Thank you for the question. I'll go to the director to respond.
In terms of the drainage that's proposed there, there is analysis done, and that analysis forms part of the engineering design, so that looks at all aspects of the drainage. My understanding is that the drainage is there as a temporary storage. It's not disposing of the water there permanently. It basically stores it there temporarily during the peak of the storm, and then basically returns it back into the system.
My problem with more than 30 years experience of walking across Halliday Park when it's wet, when you would get that storm, is that you've got water at your ankles. So I don't see how you can put water into soil which is already basically full of water. And I'm concerned that that's going to raise the water table, the nearby water table, which have adverse effect actually on my property.
In terms of the design, what we can do is actually provide you more information on the design. We can basically get that information which explains how it's going to work and what impact it has. Like I said, it's a system that's meant to temporarily store the water and then get it back into the system.
I think you can understand what I mean. When you need to temporarily store the water, Halliday Park is already, damp. The water table is, I'd say, 6 inches or above the existing, or above the ground.
So we'll come back to you with more information on that, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to ask a question? If not, we'll move on to motions from electors. As with public questions, could you please approach the lectern, speak into the microphone and state your name and suburb before moving your motion. So our first motion, we have Mr. David Dyke.
David Dyke, Maylands. My motion, I propose a simple men's health and wellbeing plan be formulated following on from the very successful Tomorrow Man workshop hosted by City of Bayswater recently, June the 12th, Men's Health Week. The #1 killer of men in Australia is heart disease, followed by suicide. Men can take preventative action to lessen their risk. There are some federal and state grants available soon for men's health and wellbeing. This actually fits snugly into the legislated public health plan. UWA Health Research Report confirms that health, 30% is genetic, 70% is lifestyle. I'd like to, in this, thank all staff, councillors that were behind the success of the Tomorrow Man workshop, and in particular Ross Millard, keeping across the admin requirements. Yes. Most of us have experienced the corrupted energy of noxious masculinity in some way, shape or form in our lives, even if ultrafine or obvious, personal or secondary. That societal distortion that tells us a man must be strong, hard and play to win. That boys don't cry and acting tough is being a man. As we grow, exposure to this noxious masculinity may lead us into an unhealthy relationship with the masculine and can often leave us denouncing and turning away from the truer expressions of positive masculinity. The positive masculine is not concerned with power, possession, or aggressive expression of strength. The positive masculine is the expression of spiritual energy that is concerned with doing, feeling, and being connected. It is action-driven, embracing both challenge, responsibility, opportunity, and accountability. It is strong and grounded, yet also compassionate and vulnerable. It is steadfast and committed, yet flexible when required. Most importantly, it does not seek to dominate, control, or possess. My aim is to have these workshops with deep respect and humility for the unique balance of masculine and feminine energy that is held within each and every one of us. Just imagine thinking outside of the square for a workshop, secret men's business for women only. The women would find out quite a bit. Tomorrow Woman for men only. Wow, the same facilitators that run Tomorrow Woman would be talking to the men. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just very quickly, David's pretty much covered it all, but I'm aware David is actively involved in men's issues. He's in a men's group himself and promotes healthy living habits. I fully support David with his motion. as I've experienced, when he is passionate about a community project, it's all go. I know that absolutely myself. Some facts to support the motion. Suicide is the leading killer of men under 55. Suicide kills 7 men a day in Australia, and 3 in 4 suicides are men. So I think this would be an extremely important project for the City of Bayswater. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone for? If not, I'll just put that straight to the vote. Please raise your hands if you are for the motion. Thank you. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. We'll now get Rhiannon Italiano.
Hi, everyone. So my motion is in relation to the land between properties on Homewood Way and Kingston Street, bordered by Broadway and Braun Ave in Embleton. It is requested that the city liaises with relevant stakeholders, for example, Water Corp and adjoining and nearby residents, to determine the appropriateness of improvements to the land, clarifying responsibilities for maintenance and access required. Explores options for improvements to the land, such as greening the land, providing usable and safe pedestrian pathways and passive lighting, while maintaining vehicle access for authorised vehicles if required, and investigates opportunities for state and federal government financial support and other grants to fund improvements.
Thank you. I'll just ask if we have a seconder. Sorry, I don't know your name. Sorry, I just need your name first. And then Violetta. Thank you. If you'd like to.
Do I do mine first?
I would like to.
Sorry. We'll just get Rhiannon to speak to the motion first, and then you can speak after her.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to all the attendees for coming along tonight to be part of this Community Democracy in Action and for considering my motion, and to all my wonderful neighbours for coming to second my motion. I will refer to the land as it's technically not a laneway. For those of you unfamiliar with this land, it's super close to Bayswater Waves and you've probably driven past it many times. If you want to find a location on Google Maps, if you search Irwin Road and Broadway, you'll find it. It's a large area as wide as a 2-lane street, as it actually used to be a road back when the area was Market Gardens. It's about 2,000 square metres in area. It used to have large power poles in it, but these were removed about 7 or 8 years ago. It contains deep sewerage. There are remnants of bitumen and road base, but it is primarily sand with no paths. My understanding is that it is Crown land under the care of the city and that Water Corp need to be able to access it. However, at one point, it was offered to be sold to adjoining property owners many, many years ago before I bought my property 10 years ago. There are 20 properties which adjoin this land, including my own. I've door-knocked each property over recent days, and at 13 properties, I was able to speak directly with the residents, and those that weren't at home, I left a letter for, explaining my plan for this motion and requesting they contact me if they had any concerns. Every resident I spoke with was very supportive of improvements being made and shared concerns about its current state. To provide some background, I first contacted the city in 2017 to report hooning, motorbikes and dirt bikes speeding through the land. I was also concerned about the maintenance of the land, with rubbish being dumped and lots of weeds and prickles in there. After multiple emails and a meeting with the then director, a gate was installed at the Broadway end in 2018. No further improvements have been made since that time, and in fact, I believe the condition of the land has deteriorated in terms of the sand and the unevenness. Dumping continues to be an issue. The furniture, e-waste, construction waste, garden waste, general bagged rubbish. Maintenance is quite sporadic. When door knocking, residents have reported actually removing weeds and grass behind the properties themselves due to the weeds encroaching into their properties and concerns about fire risks. It's very difficult to use as a pedestrian because it's like walking on a beach in some sections, trudging through sand, and there's a lot of double Gs in there, and it's also not safe for walking dogs through because of this. At least one property experiences flooding to the back of their property and shed from the water runoff from Brawn going into the land. The lack of lighting makes it unsafe and an easy entry point for potential burglars, and some neighbours reported that homes had been broken into via the back fence. The gate also hasn't entirely ended the hooning, unfortunately, and I last reported a hoon, which was a ute, to the police in March. It's also just really, really ugly and a huge eyesore. Given the access way is in the Morley Station precinct, according to the draft local planning strategy, I think now is the time to begin to look at what improvements could be made to this underutilised land and explore opportunities for funding these improvements.
Thank you. Just ask the seconder, Violetta, if you would like to speak to the motion.
Yeah, so
I'll just get you to come up to the lectern.
basically, Rhiannon already mentioned the fire risk. So that was one of the concerns that I've mentioned to her when she came to my property to get support for the motion. So I found myself last year at the beginning of summer taking my green bin empty around the corner onto this empty laneway and removing all the scrubs along the retaining wall along my property fence there myself. Because the council has been coming around clearing the laneway probably twice a year, I'd say, maybe once a year, twice a year. But they don't really go all the way to the fence line. So to the, the fence and the retaining wall line. So basically the shrubs are growing up literally to where the retaining wall finishes and the fence starts and creeping into my property, into my garden beds. And therefore, at the beginning of summer, I just removed it all myself simply because I was worried that if a fire was started by some, juveniles hanging out there at night or so, yeah, they would be creeping onto my property easily. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Mr. Smith? Just give me one moment. Please come to the lectern.
I'd like to know the size of the land. I'd like to know who owns the land. And it appears as though it may be owned by the state, but vested in the local government, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I'd like to know what the zoning or the classification of the land is in the town planning scheme.
Thanks for those questions. I'll see if the director is able to respond to any of those at this time. Okay. We'll have to take those ones on notice. I'll just go, the director just, I'm sorry, the CEO wants to add some comment.
It's talking to the director alongside me. We believe it is Crown land, but we would need to confirm that.
But Crown land sort of owned by the Water Authority, but vested in the council, or just Crown land, you don't know? But you should be able to tell us what the land's zoned for, shouldn't you, or classification? I'd be happy to get the answer.
Sorry, Mr. Talione, you can, in your right of reply at the end, you can address any of these issues. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Smith, the officers will look up the zoning as we're going through. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone like to speak for the motion? If not, I think we just got a response to, just getting a response.
Okay, we've just checked. The land is actually owned by Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage and vested to the city, and it's zoned as drainage.
So, Ms. Taliano, if you would like to do a right of reply? No? Okay. So we'll now put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. So could we now have Rachel Roberts.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know, a few of us in the City of Bayswater have been involved in a probably 2-year discussion with the council about cat laws. So this is related to that. The motions for today are: number one, congratulates the council for its continued efforts to introduce local cat laws that protect both native wildlife and the health and wellbeing of domestic cats. Number two, supports the council's request for City of Bayswater representatives to meet with the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation and the local government minister to discuss this issue. And finally, we call on the council to not reconsider this matter until at least its August regular meeting, to allow for meetings with the CDL and the local government minister, noting that the status quo will remain where the council continues to not implement clause 2.2 of the proposed local cat laws.
Thank you. I'll just ask if we have a seconder. Mr. Dyke, please go ahead if you'd like to speak to the motion.
Yep, just very quickly. The background to this is at the City of Bayswater AGM in March 2021, a resolution was passed calling for cats to be contained at home as part of our local cat laws for the wellbeing of cats and our native wildlife. Thank you to David Dyke and now Councillor Josh Everson for bringing this issue to our attention and action. We're 27 months on, so 2 years on, and we ratepayers would like to wholeheartedly thank our councillors for gazetting a clause in our new local cat laws that does not allow a cat to be in a public place unless the cat is under effective control. Our legal advice has confirmed that this local law is a legal, responsible, proportionate and effective response under WA's Cat Act 2011.
Thank you. Mr. Dyke, would you like to speak to it?
I vividly remember in March 21 being in this room, and it's been a fairly rocky road since then. I've spent hours and hours and hours on this motion, and I'd like to thank staff in the City of Bayswater, councillors, individuals, Environment House, all of the friends groups. They've been amazing in looking at this. Thank you very much. And especially the governance section. They've been really good to collaborate with. I couldn't have wished for a better unit to talk this out. It's important the local cat law is rescheduled to August so that collaboration can be exhausted by friends groups plus councillors with the CDL, senior policy advisors, Minister Michael, Minister Whitby, and all other stakeholders in the metro area and around the state. Other agencies such as RSPCA, Cat Haven, vets, and pet rescue groups are all in total agreement with clause 2.2, remaining in the City of Bayswater local cat law. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Mr. Smith?
Greg Smith. I would like to know what clause 2.2 of the proposed local cat laws are.
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the governance manager to respond.
Through the Mayor. I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but essentially clause 2.2 prohibits cats from being in public places unless they're under effective control. So that would include, for example, a verge in front of a property would be a public place.
Council continues to not implement clause 2.2.
Through
Thank
the
you.
Mayor.
I'll go to the-
So what is,
Is that still on? Yes. So what happened was last year that the City of Bayswater implemented the new local law, and it included clause 2.2. As part of the local law adoption process, the local law gets reviewed by the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation, which is a committee of Parliament. That committee came back to the City of Bayswater and advised us that clause 2.2 was not, I guess the words would be allowable, and asked the City of Bayswater to make an undertaking that it wouldn't enforce that clause and that it would initiate an amendment to the local law to remove that clause. And we've advertised that amendment, and that's what the council now needs to consider, whether or not it will proceed with amending the local law to remove that clause, or whether it will leave it in.
and the clause is that you've got to control cats on your verge.
The clause is that cats must be under effective control in public places, which would include that.
Verge. Yeah.
Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone for the motion? If not, I'll put it straight to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. Okay, we'll now go to Rob Farina.
My name is Rob Farina from Morley. Motion 1, the council requests the CEO to investigate parking options to reduce congestion and hazards on Elstead Way, Morley. Receive petition signed by the residents requesting that council consider resident permit parking or no parking restrictions on Elstead Way, Morley.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask if we have a seconder. Mr. Smith. Go ahead, Mr. Farina, if you'd like to speak.
I've got more photos. You can see the restrictions here. If another car parks here, the lady can't exit or enter, and she can have a collision with another motor vehicle. And it's going to cause insurance policy and issues. There's another car parked here. If somebody drives along here, another person drives along there, there's a blind spot and a collision can happen. There's also a water court, vacant land behind on the other side of Elstead Way that can be used as an overflow, but I understand that it's Crown land. I can pass these photos around and people can have a look in support.
Thank you very much.
And I've got a motion too.
Sorry?
I've got my second motion. You want to read that now?
We'll do this one first.
Sure.
So I'll just ask the seconder if he would like to speak to the motion. No? I'll just ask, would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone like to speak for the motion? If not, I'll put it straight to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. So you may now.
Can I add something a little bit more to that? Or can I add something more? Because you've got the new Morley train station being built. That's
the motion's been carried,
sure. Yep.
So you don't need to
Cool.
go into that, but you've got a second motion?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That the council requests the CEO to look into ways to utilising ranges resources efficiently, to look at illegal dumping on verges and infringe owners and remove rubbish at the front.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Smith? Mr. Farina, if you'd like to speak to the motion.
That's all I've got to say.
Yep. Mr. Smith, would you like to speak to it? Would anyone like to speak against it? Anyone wish to speak for it? If not, I'll put straight to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. Thank you. We'll now go to Branka Radanovic.
Branka Radanovic of Bayswater. My motion for the city to mandate and prioritise at least one tree on every residential verge with underground power.
Thank you. I'll just see if there's a seconder. Mrs. Smith. Ms. Radanovic, if you'd like to speak to it.
Yes. I've lost count as to how many times I've brought this motion to the city via an AGM and at council. City of Bayswater tree canopy coverage currently sits at a low 14.5 thereabouts %, and most likely will be less at the next reading, which will take up the huge losses by main roads, residential infill, and the 100 plus trees destroyed by Metronet around the Bayswater station. Canopy coverage for Morley is an eye-watering low 10.8%. Treeless verges dominate this area and most have underground power. Why would any reasonable councillor block a mandate to plant a tree on every residential verge, as was the case with my motion last year? I've dumbed down my motion from last year, which was voted out by the 6 councillors who hold majority, in the hope that this modified motion will be passed. There is no doubt that planting verge trees where there is underground power will give the best outcome for future tree canopy. And I believe the city must commit and stay true to the greening vision and overarching urban forest strategy.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith, would you like to speak to the motion?
Trees mitigate climate change, mitigate the urban heat island effect. The city has care, control and maintenance of virtually every street verge within the city, as well as, other parks and recreation areas. So the street verges and the potential trees are an important means of increasing the canopy and mitigating the urban heat island effect and climate change. For council not to adopt this and try and wholeheartedly implement it is beyond understanding. And so I hope people vote for it.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Please come forward.
Georgina Kerr, Bedford. As someone who's a frequent pedestrian with children in the city of Bayswater, what it comes down to me is whether a verge is for a private good or the greater good. As they generally come under the control of the city, as Mr. Smith said, I believe they're for the greater good. And the difference between, so the street I live on, for whatever reason, about half of it has a good spread of verge trees, about half of it doesn't. And the difference walking from school at 3 p.m, which, as we'd all know, is the height of the heat in Perth. The difference between walking that stretch without the trees and with the trees is immense. We can't understate the value of those trees to the greater good and to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the motion?
Harvey Tonkin, Naranda. I'm not prepared, but I don't disagree with the intention of putting the trees in. I disagree with the implementation. When the people who plant the trees, they don't care where they plant it. Now, I know from experience that probably 100% of the city of Bayswater has R25. With that, it allows people to construct 2 dwellings. And I've seen this time and time again where there's a street tree or two placed at the front of the property, and it doesn't allow that particular owner to capitalise on the value of their property. Now, I've seen lots of cases where the council has put trees in. The person who puts it in doesn't think about how big the tree is. They don't think about where it's located. They might stick it in the middle. They might stick it to the side. So if this goes ahead, then all I'm saying is that the council needs to ensure that the trees are planted in an appropriate place in the front of the property. Now, just quickly, an example. There's a drainage sump near where I live. There's a guy adjacent to the drainage sump. His whole western side of his property's got solar panels. The council planted, this is going back a while, eucalyptus trees there. 5, 10 years' time, his solar panels are useless after 12 o'clock because the sun won't get through. I asked the council, can they shift it? They shifted the trees. But the people who installed the trees didn't think about what the repercussions were of the location of that particular tree. That's why I'm against. Okay.
Anyone wish to speak for? Anyone against? No, I'll go to Ms. Radanovic for right of reply. Do you wish to speak?
Just for the greater good, I think a tree on every residential verge would be amazing. And for walkability, just generally, I think I'd say a big tick to a tree on every verge, and I hope this happens before the end of my life. I've been pushing this one for a long time.
Thank you. I'll now put this to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. Thank you. Georgina Kerr?
Thank you. I'll keep this one brief. In light of the new draft bike plan, that the City of Bayswater establish an active transport advisory committee.
Thank you. I'll just see if we have a seconder. Ms. Garstone. Please, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you. So I've noted that the City of Bayswater doesn't currently have an active transport advisory committee. We have a skate development and bike committee, but that's to do with bikes as recreation and sport. So active transport includes on foot, bikes, electric bicycles, electric scooters. Some people ride electric unicycles, which is beyond my level of coordination, but you know, whatever floats your boat. And that is really important as a city, particularly as we get higher density, we've got more residents, we need to encourage the use of active transport. What I've noted is that one of the common bits of feedback about the new draft bike plan was that the last bike plan sounded very good in theory, but nothing much ever actually happened from it. So given that and other recent projects like the bike lanes on Railway Parade, for example, which were put in even though nobody I know who actually rides a bike asked for them. And then that causes more conflict between those who use active transport and those who don't, because it turned out not to really suit anyone at all. So I think that having an advisory committee of, and I know that some councillors do use active transport, which is great, but not all do, and obviously each would be in certain areas of the city. So I think to have an advisory committee with stakeholders who actually regularly get around our city on foot or on bike or some sort of two-wheeled or one-wheeled device would be really helpful to make sure that the city is spending money wisely and using resources wisely to benefit everybody.
Thank you. Scarstone, would you like to speak to it?
I support this motion for some recent experience in communicating with Metronet in regard to the noise walls along the footpath or the new shared path along Watley Crescent. I was shocked to see the colour that they were painted, a dark colour. Sort of my experience is that an excellent way to mitigate urban heat island effect and also to cool the environment is to use cool colours for surfaces that are such as along a shared path to help the pedestrians and cyclists use that area in comfort. I tried to sort of find a transport group to sort of check my concerns with, and I wasn't able to. The response I got from Metronet leaves me sort of questioning the decision of using that colour, and I fully endorse having an active transport advisory committee to sort of help ensure that that getting around as a pedestrian and cycling is, the best amenities possible.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against? Anyone for? Yes, you may, if you come up to the lectern.
So my question is just that my understanding was that with the new draft bike plan, there was a recommendation in that there was an advisory committee set up for people using bikes for transport. Am I incorrect in thinking that, or?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the director to respond.
That's correct. There is a recommendation in there to establish an advisory committee.
So would this advisory committee be the same thing or an extension of that, or its own separate committee? Like, would this one be more for cyclists and pedestrians, and the other from the bike plan would be just for cyclists?
In terms of the one that's mentioned in the bike plan, we still need to develop the terms of reference for that one there. So they could actually have different roles just depending on what we give each group to do. So they could be combined as one, actually.
Thank you. Would anyone like Mr. Smith speaking? Yes, come forward.
Probably for the last 3 months, there's been no lighting between Coode Street and the Bayswater pub on this side of the railway line. Now that's very unfriendly for pedestrians, very unfriendly for cyclists, pretty much unfriendly for everyone. And as a consequence, the opposite of promoting active transport. So if we had this active transport committee, would I complain about that to this active transport group? Would I complain to my ward councillors? Would I complain to Metronet?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to the CEO to respond.
Through the chair, I'd encourage that you would raise those concerns with Metronet in relation to that. But in terms of the scope, as the director just indicated, the scope for the terms of reference hasn't been determined as yet. So the response we wouldn't be able to answer until we've actually developed that terms of reference for that actual committee, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone wish to speak for? If not, I'll go to the mover to close.
Thank you. Just in regards to Ms. Italiano's question, this motion specifically mentions active transport because I think it's really important to include biking for transport more with pedestrians to distinguish it from biking as sport. So I think rather than just have a cycling advisory committee, that the framing of it as active transport is important for the intent. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put this to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. Okay, we'll now move on to Andrea Vinkovic.
Thank you. My name is Andrea Vinkovic and I represent Maylands. Given that 95% of Western Australians participate in arts and cultural activities, and the benefits of a vibrant arts and cultural sector on creativity, mental health and well-being, cultural pride and identity, among others, is well documented, it is recommended that the Council consider appointing a dedicated arts and culture officer or coordinator.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Ms. Kerr, please go ahead.
I don't necessarily have much more to say about it, except that I'm aware that Council is doing a really good job with managing the art prizes and the exhibition and lots of other events. But when I talk to the people who are coordinating and asking how come there is no dedicated art officer, they say, yes, please, we would like one, which made me come and stand here in front of you asking, yes, please, can we consider to have one?
Thank you. Ms. Kerr, would you like to speak to the motion? Would anyone like to speak against? Anyone wish to speak for? Please go ahead.
Jim Chantry, Bayswater. I'm a member of the Roxy Lane Theatre. This is what we're all about. Now, I'd like to draw our attention to several years ago, going back 4 or 5 years ago, there was a survey conducted by the city about the needs for arts groups and the possibility of building a community theatre on a large scale, which seems to have fallen by the wayside. I would like to see something like this happening and get some feedback from the council as what progress has been made on previous investigations. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against? Anyone wish to speak for? If not, I'll go to Ms. Vinkovic to, if you wish to close.
I've got nothing else to say, thank you.
Okay, I'll now put this to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. Okay, Mr. Smith.
Approximately 10 years ago, the City of Bayswater cut down 7 trees, WA peppermint trees or Wanhill trees in Halliday Park. Now, I was a bit upset about it and protested and got some Channel 7 news down there, and we had an AGM at the time where council were lambasted for being dendrophobes. In response to the adverse publicity, council promised they would plant 2 trees for every one that was removed. Council did that, but about a year later...
Sorry, Mr. Smith, sorry, are you going into debate?
No.
Because I just need you to read the motion because I need to get a seconder.
The City of Bayswater plant 1 peppermint tree in Halliday Park in the specific location as promised almost a decade ago, following the removal of 7 Wanhill trees from the heritage listed Halliday Park. That's my motion.
Do I have a seconder? Ms. Radanovic. No, if you'd like to speak to the motion.
I've already spoken for it.
That's so I know. Ms. Radanovic, would you like to speak to the motion? Would anyone like to speak against? Anyone wish to speak in favour? If not, I'll put it straight to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. You have a second one, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I think so.
This time you can put your hand up if you wish to vote for your own motion.
Yeah, oh, yes, okay. I didn't think it was necessary then. that the signage in Claughton Reserve be altered so as to exclude off-leash dogs from the barbecue area.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Taliano, Mr. Smith, if you'd like to speak to it.
Yes, Claughton Reserve, one of my favourite spots for a picnic by the river. And I don't know about you, but when I'm having a picnic, got my sausages there, my steak, my chicken, whatever, cooking on the barbecue, I'm not interested in some dog running up and trying to take it off the barbecue. And currently your signage says you can have off-leash dogs where the barbecue area is. Mind-boggling.
Thank you. Mr. Taliano, do you wish to speak to it? Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone wish to speak for? I'll put that straight to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That is carried. Okay. So that's all the people who've registered to move a motion. Is there anyone else who would like to move anything this evening? Okay. If not, I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and for the questions and motions raised. These motions that were raised tonight will be considered by Council at the Ordinary Council meeting on the 22nd of August 2023. And I will close this evening's AGM at 8:07 p.m. Thank you, everyone.